Hi everybody, can you see me and hear me? I'm gonna assume yes. So has anybody had any systems change or just change conversations in their community in the last week? Augustina, do you want me to unmute you so you can talk? I see that you have your hand raised. Okay. Okay. Yeah, no problem. Just checking. So it sounds like nobody's had any meetings this week. That's fine. We're trying to be really flexible. Just again, the implementation date for coordinated entry is January 23rd of 2018. So we have time, but it's probably good if you start your conversation soon. So today we are going to be covering meeting 7 of the System Change Toolkit. I'm really excited for this meeting and for the next meeting because this is when we're going to be introducing the idea of a 100-day challenge. So has anybody heard of 100-day challenges in the context of homeless services? And I'm going to ask questions so you guys participate. Okay, so Michelle says not yet. Wendy's work, or I guess this is in terms of the meeting. Yes, she's heard about the 100-day challenge. Michelle, can you talk about in what context you've heard about them? Veterans, perfect. John Meyer says, yes, went to Denton presentation at the THN conference. Awesome. So the 100-day challenge is borrowed from this book. It's called Rapid Results, How 100-Day Projects Build the Capacity for Large-Scale Change. So this is the basic premise of the 100,000 Homes campaign, and it's now what Built for Zero, which was formerly Zero to 2016, does for veterans. And it's also what's being done for youth right now, I think through an organization, I think they're called A Way Home, but I'm not entirely positive. And so Becky, who led the 100,000 Homes campaign, had read an article about a 100-day challenge in Ethiopia. And I think they were looking at educational attainment or health or some public health, something like that. And the idea is that you set this limited time frame, you set these high goals, and both that limited time frame and those goals really incentivize people to change. So the idea is that we are creating this small change that will lead to everlasting change. So a good example of this, I found this cute little infographic while we were writing the Systems Change Toolkit. And so the idea behind change is actually really simple. So you recognize that you need new mindset and new skill sets, and that's something that we're trying to do through coordinated entry and systems change. We're trying to build local leadership. We're trying to build facilitation capacity. We're trying to build data quality. We're seeing that in HUD, in the HUD world, but also in the funding world for nonprofits, that funders are looking more at data and the impact that you're having, the quality of the services that you're providing over the quantity of people that you're serving. And so that requires a new mindset and a new skill set. Devolving resources and influence to those closest to the problem. So the idea is that you're targeting your resources towards those people that are closest to the problem, or in our world, we think of that as chronically homeless, right? The most vulnerable in our community. Not rolling anything out until you have evidence that it works. So when you've heard me say during these webinars, we're seeing across the country that ending homelessness is possible. There's no affordable housing anywhere. It's there are some communities with additional resources, but for the most part, they are not doing them doing these sweeping changes with additional resources. And so what they're doing is they're taking evidence of what's worked in other communities and they're tweaking it to fit the context of their community. And so that's where they're taking this evidence and this data informed best practices. And then you're changing slowly through small scale experimentation. So this is the idea of beta testing, right? So we're identifying these things that we want to change and then we're piloting it. So with the 100-day challenge, we're identifying those things we want to change, and then over the course of 100 days, we're working towards changing that and then studying it at the end to see if it had the impact that we expected. And that's where this next item comes in, which is the reflection and contemplation rather than lots of management activity. So at the end of your changing and your small scale experimentation, you're taking the time to reflect on the outcomes. Were they what you had thought? If they're not, what do you need to tweak in order to maybe reach what you thought it should be? That kind of stuff. So it's actually, it's just this continuous improvement cycle, right? This is also why the toolkit is broken down how it is. So continuous improvement is plan, right? So we're planning to do it. We're doing it. So this is where the 100-day challenge comes in. We're studying it, and then we're acting. So we're doing it all over again. So this, I'm, again, really excited about this one because this is where all of the analysis that you guys have been doing over the course of the last 7 weeks is going to come into play because you're going to start making decisions about change, right? You're going to start committing as a community, as a group of people coming together about what is our goal and what are those things that we need to change in order to reach that goal. So yeah, I'm really excited. So facilitators agenda. So it's actually during this meeting that you're going to go over the qualitative assessment tool. The intention of this is really to kind of wrap up everything that you've already been doing, right? We've talked about what it means to end homelessness. We've come up with a definition for what homelessness means in our community. We've looked at the numbers. I think it was the second or third meeting. You know, you use your HMIS data, your PIT data to look at what's the scope of the issue. And then we did system-wide analysis, and in last meeting you did individual agency analysis. And so now what this is doing is taking input from all these different stakeholders, so executive directors and community leaders, direct service providers, more frontline folks, and then also people with lived experience to find out what are their views of the system. And the idea is that wraps everything up that you've done, but it also foments you to really set these really ambitious goals. I think what you're going to see in a lot of communities is that the view of your housing crisis response system is going to vary dramatically between your different stakeholder groups. And so hopefully you're taking all of that in mind. So again, 100-day challenge. If anybody wants this, I actually have it online. So if you're interested in reading it, let me know. There's a folder on here called 100-day challenge. And it just has a ton of examples of different 100-day challenges. So like I said, this has been going on for a while. I really like this one, Preventing and Ending Youth Homelessness 100-Day Challenge. Austin was one of the communities that did it. And they exceeded their goal. And so did, I believe Cleveland was the other community, and I can't remember the last one, but they all met their goal. And even more so, I think for Austin it was 100 people and they served maybe like 110. It's 10 people. It's still more. And so there's a lot of different examples about the 100-day challenges. Again, this is in the context oftentimes of youth and veterans, but it still applies for focusing on just your overall literally homeless population. And so what your facilitator will do you'll go over the qualitative assessment tool, and then you'll go into what is a 100-day challenge and how are we going to set ourselves up for that. So the first thing that you need to do is to develop an aim statement. It's just a goal statement. and your drivers, which are those activities or changes that you need to do in order to achieve that goal. So you'll see, let's see, which should I show first? I'll show the activity first. So this is the activity of basically how to go through your aim statement and how to develop your drivers. And so for your aim statement, what you're really looking for is, and it says it in here, the statement must describe what is going to be improved, by how much, by when, so what is the deadline, and for whom. It should ultimately answer the following questions. What are we trying to accomplish? How will we know if we're successful, and what is our timeline? So the idea is that you guys will figure out when your 100-day challenge will start, and then your deadline is 100 days later, right? And then with that, you're going to be looking at your drivers. So if, for example, in 100 days, we're going to end homelessness for 150 households that come through our emergency shelter, I'm going to come up with 4 things, and that's flexible, but I recommend doing all 4 things because you need to change various facets, right? So what are 4 things that I need to change or work on in order to facilitate that? So let's say, for example, my system really doesn't engage landlords very well. So one of my drivers is going to be working on landlord outreach. Another driver, let's say we've looked at our data and in talking to people, we've seen that getting access to deposits, right, is an issue. And let's say we don't have any rapid rehousing in the community. So one of the drivers could be trying to access local dollars in order to pay for deposits. So that could mean reaching out to your city, reaching out to your county, reaching out to businesses, what have you. The idea is that you come up with this idea and then you go from there. So what the activity is you'll come up with your aim statement, and you guys already to some extent should have it because you've quantified the scope of homelessness in your community, and you really just need to come up with your plan, right? So we want to end homelessness for 15% of the homeless population, that is 150 people, by January 26, 2017, right? And we're going to use this data. And so what you'll do is you'll develop your aim statement, then you'll read it, and then you'll tell people, okay, so what activities and changes do we need to do, or do we need to have happen in order to reach our goal? And then you'll say go. So the idea is that, and if you guys did the coordinated entry orientations with me when I first started this job, it's kind of the same thing. You can get Post-it notes or have people just write ideas places. But the idea is that you're fostering creativity. So this is not a situation of yes, but, or no, but. This is more of a situation of yes, and, right? So you can build off of ideas that people have. You can come up with new ideas. Also trying to keep in mind those best practices that we talked about in the last couple of meetings. And then what the facilitator will do is go through and review all the activities, right? You'll debrief, you'll talk through anything that doesn't make any sense, try to cluster things. So if a couple of them are very clearly targeted toward landlords, you'll cluster them, right? Or if another one is very clearly looking at data, for example. So, that's one thing that Denton looked at. You would have another cluster for data. And then you'll allow time for people to vote on which drivers ultimately you guys, right, as a body, as an entity, want to work on in the next 100 days. So that's that. There's this worksheet right here. Again, really simple, just your aim statement, what is it, and what are the different drivers that you guys decide upon. Meeting 8 is where you're going to come up with more of the action plans and who's responsible, it could be a group of people or one person is ultimately responsible. This should not land on one person's shoulders. So I'm going to make that caveat. I know that happens a lot in a lot of communities. People need to do the work. And you guys, the intention is that you do this multiple times, right? So like once your first 100-day challenge ends, you can do this activity again, right? You can look at when I say the study piece, right, you can look at what works for each of your drivers and then determine if you want to do that driver again, but maybe tweak it a little bit. Or that driver was wildly successful. We're going to continue doing it. Let's come up with a new one. So I really encourage you guys to treat this as a very iterative process. The intention, that's why this is a cycle, the PDSA cycle. The intention is that it's very iterative and you're doing it over and over again. So there are some really great examples of these from 0 to 2016, or sorry, Built for Change. And I want to give them props because most of the materials for this meeting and the next meeting come directly from them. So thank you guys. So a good example, or let's see. So this is the 0 to 2016 aim statement. So 0 to 2016 Built for Change. So the 0 to 2016 movement, composed of 75 communities, will end homelessness among veterans by December 2015 and end chronic homelessness by the end of 2016. So that's their aim statement. From there, they determined what their drivers are, and the overarching description of this is ultimately, what is your theory of change, right? So I have my goal, and then I have those things that I want to work on in order to affect that goal. And so for them, right, all communities will end veteran homelessness by December 31st of 2015 and end chronic homelessness by the end of 2016. And so they've identified 4 things that communities should look at, right? So improving housing placement performance, increasing the capability of local leaders, build a creative, connected, and committed movement, and optimally functioning 0 to 2016 team. So that is how 0 to 2016 Built for Change is operating their project. They also have a really good example of trying to lose weight. So I want to lose 20 pounds by the end of 2017, and their drivers are looking at calories in and calories out, right? And then you come up with the activities or the more specific activities in your problem set. This is another really good example, and this comes directly from the Built for Zero newsletter. They've been putting these in all of them, which I really enjoy. So for Northwest Arkansas, their aim statement is by August 31st of 2017, create a real-time by name list of chronically homeless individuals and increase our score on the scorecard for 5. Built for Zero has a scorecard for by name lists, and if you get a certain number of points, it means that you are optimally performing your by name list. And so their change idea is to pilot the VI SPDAT with 3 to 5 people at a local community meal to kickstart the list. And then they talk about how it went down. There's also Columbia Boone County, Missouri, something very similar. There's also Honolulu. So their aim statement, and you can get creative with it too. It's really cool. New Orleans had one at the end that said "Who dat," right? So you can get creative and infuse local flair into it as well. So we, the leaders of Honolulu, commit to ending all homelessness utilizing our local coordinated access and housing placement system, coordinated entry system, starting with 985 veterans and their families by December 31st of 2015, 1,020 individuals experiencing chronic homelessness by December 31st of 2016, and for all families by 2020, reaching and sustaining functional 0. And then they have people sign it. And then it goes into their theory of change. So these are the 4 things that they're focusing on: data integrity and performance management, increase housing, increase street to home services, and expand and strengthen your coordinated access and housing placement system. So for those communities that are required to implement coordinated entry, do you see where now coordinated entry fits into this overarching change process? I think, actually I won't say anything. Do you guys see that? Yeah. Yeah, so John Meyer and John Cooper both say yes. So for a lot of you guys, implementing coordinated entry is going to be one of your drivers. And this is, right, this goes back to the housing crisis response system. Coordinated entry is just one piece of everything. there are a lot of things that need to happen in order to end homelessness. And so coordinated entry should be one driver. It should not be the driver. Another great example is this Home for Good driver. So theirs is create and sustain an effective end to homelessness for all populations, beginning with vets by 2015 and chronically homeless persons by 2017. Their primary drivers are comprehensive engagement, know everyone that is homeless and what they need, sufficient resources, secure a sufficient supply of resources to meet demand, efficient and effective processes, connect people quickly to the resources best suited for them, and then continuous improvement. Cultivate a culture of learning and continuous improvement, which is what we're trying to do with this process. In the next meeting, you guys will be coming up with your action plans. And there's also a really cool PDSA worksheet from Built for Zero that helps you look at each of the, like what your aim statement is, what driver a group of people or one person is working towards, and then how they're going to ultimately measure whether or not that driver was successful. And so that's what this last column is right here, right? What data are we going to use to say that ultimately we were successful in doing this? It's really cool. I went to the San Antonio 0 to 2016 action camp last year. I'll answer that in a second, John. So I went to the San Antonio 0 to 2016 action camp last year, and it's amazing really how this really galvanizes the community and gets people to come together and people from different issue areas working on the same thing. So the second day of the action camp is basically to work on your drivers, and they would have different teams, and it was really cool to see people from different teams. Like this team was focusing on housing and there was another team focusing on data, and the housing people needed some data, so they just walked over to the data team and asked them for information. So it's really a cool way to get everybody really excited about change and about ending homelessness. And that's what we've been seeing with the efforts to end veteran homelessness and also with the 100-day challenges for youth. So John Meyer, should we utilize a by name list for the homeless population? Yes. So the idea is with the by name list, the master list, and the balance of state, we call it the housing priority list because you should be using it to prioritize people for housing. The whole idea of that, and that again comes from 100,000 Homes campaign, is you do not know what you're addressing if you do not know each person's individual situation. And so that's one thing that I absolutely agree with in terms when it comes to ending homelessness and what are the things that you need to do is you should have a constant running list of people experiencing homelessness in your community. Perfect. So John Cooper says we're doing that now even though we don't have any PSH. And you don't need PSH to do it. You really don't. A lot of communities are using their by name lists to do case conferencing. So they come together, and this is something when the written standards come out, I'm hoping next week. I'm waiting on a phone call with somebody and it's not scheduled till next week. But what communities are doing is they're using the housing priority list to identify people that are not moving off the list and then trying to come up with ways to get them housed. So you don't need PSH to move people off the list. You just need a little bit of creativity. I mean, PSH would be helpful, right, in some circumstances, but in other circumstances, you just need a little bit of creativity and community problem solving. So does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, so Lisa asked, will HUD's requirements per CE be part of the written standards? Yes. And what is the definition of case conferencing? So this will be all in the written standards. So yeah, so that's part of the reason why it's taken a while is that we had public comment in November, and then HUD released the new standards in January. So we had to update them and not send them out with old information. And then case conferencing varies. So SSVF, for example, her question is, what is the definition of case conferencing? The idea behind case conferencing is really just case managers and people from different agencies coming together and group problem solving for people. And it can look different ways. So in Houston and also in the balance of state, how we're defining case conferencing is when ultimately people are rejected from a project because maybe they no longer meet eligibility requirements or what have you, then you would have to call for case conferencing to figure out where next to send the household. So it varies, and that's one thing that Cameron and I talk a lot about, is that definition actually it changes. And SSVF has a really great resource on what case conferencing is, so you should check that out, Lisa. I think you can just Google SSVF case conferencing. Any other questions? And the nice thing about this, right, is for those of you that put implement coordinated entry as a driver, you'll have the written standards in place to set up that system in line with your in line with the written standards and in line with the balance of state, and kind of get that like marked off as you're meeting the balance of state standards. So I think it's actually perfect timing. Okay, I don't see anything else coming in, and nobody has raised their hands. So again, our last meeting is next week, same place, same time. Hoping for the written standards to be released either Thursday or Friday of next week. And that's about, oh, I actually just realized I have one thing in here. So with your aim statement or with any of the goals that you set, you really want to make sure that they're smart, right? So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. And so this is where the 100-day challenge comes in, especially with the time bound. So this describes the aim statement. This is what you're trying to do through the aim statement and through everything that you do from here on out, is setting really smart goals. Anything else? So if anybody has any questions, you know where to reach me. I'm available. And it was great talking to y'all today, and I look forward to our next meeting. I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you.